Hello, everyone, and welcome to my favorite and the most popular advocate TV show we have here on Pod TV, Timeshare Solution or Surrender, where Irene Parker, who heads up TARDA, takes on some of the toughest situations of deceitful acts by timeshares. And I say deceitful acts by timeshares because not every situation or bad situation that people have are from deceitful acts of timeshares. It's just maybe purely from not understanding the rules and regulations and what you purchased. But many that we have noticed lately, there have been many deceitful acts. And Irene has taken each one of these on, and she has been doing this show for 34 weeks. We have 33 episodes. We took 1 week off and ran a rerun while we were in court to help and unify to help other victims of timeshare deceitful acts. Now, this is what I want to explain. It's kind of like going on vacation, and they talk you into going into one of their meetings. And in that meeting, they might hold you hostage for 4 to 6 hours from some of the stories that we told. You're dehydrated, you're tired, you're exhausted. You just want to get on with your vacation. And somehow in all of that, they convince you have to spend, anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 buying a 1 week window. Hi, Irene.
Hi, you know what?
I'm owning that for your life. And so what Irene does is she takes the situations where it's more of a horror story for some of these people, where they end up getting something that they really didn't realize that they were purchasing, or were misrepresented in the sale, or like recently where all of a sudden they end up going home and have $70,000 worth of debt and didn't realize that they got in debt. So Irene, welcome. I kind of was running some air there just to wait until you got in. So where are you at today?
I am always so ultra paranoid about people messing up the time zones because sometimes we have. So I'm in Central Time, and I'm thinking I have another hour before this show. So my apologies for dashing in here at the last
I've
minute.
been in and out of the country, so I have that problem too. So I respect that.
Okay, so I'd like to go ahead and I didn't turn my phone off. So if we have anybody new calling, I can interrogate the scam artist.
I like that.
So we can take another call that might come in. So let's go ahead and bring on Miriam. I don't see Karen yet.
Karen's here. Karen's here and all ready to go. So you want Miriam first?
Hello. Yes. Hi, Miriam. Let's go ahead and bring Karen on stage as well. Hi, Karen.
Hi. Great to see you.
I was just explaining to Kim that I usually am like so paranoid that people are going to mess up the time zones, because sometimes we have 4, and I'm here in St. Louis Central Time thinking I had another hour before that. I'm so embarrassed. So
Good thing we're a friendly bunch.
So I'll never criticize anyone again. But Miriam was our guest last week with the Manhattan Club, that is a total timeshare nightmare, with the New York Attorney General in 2014 fining Mr. Eichner and Bruce Eichner and the 5 entities and his partner $6.5 million, when $100 million was paid to in HOA fees to an entity that had no employees until noted, so the $6.5 million was basically a slap on the wrist and no financial hardship. And Mr. Eichner is now, I saw an interview with him where he is happily selling $1 million condos in South Florida now. So it's back to the rich get richer. And then we also have Karen this week. who is, she and I go back to 2019 when Timeshare and I became a perfect storm. So I had attended a legislative workshop where it was stated that Wyndham has a hardship department. So, there's no need for lawyers or exit companies to help people in timeshare. We have all of this covered. And then I received a call from Simon. I still remember Simon that reached out, and I contacted the admin of a Canadian Facebook group. She's an expert on Canadian timeshares, and she informed me that Carriage will not foreclose. I'm like, what do you mean they won't foreclose? She says, no, they'll go after their kids and grandkids for maintenance fees. And I thought something is not right. And then Karen connected with a Carriage Hills Facebook group. And we're going to have her talk about her efforts to organize, along with, you were called affectionately, the Three Amigos. Mm-hmm. And we're able to produce quite an extraordinary outcome. But I have an ulterior motive. I'm always hoping that if you folks hear about some of the other tragedies, that you'll join forces with us as a volunteer for other people. So I want to begin today's show and have you both listen and comment, if you will, on there's been quite a few people that have reached out since our last show. And Karen is talking about today Wyndham, Carriage Hills, and Carriage Ridge in Ontario, Canada. Miriam is also an Ontario resident. So one of the callers, she's in the top 5 of 3,000 people who have reached out. Wyndham crossed the line in this report. I am beyond disgusted, and I hope that both of you are equally outraged, and I hope we can find a lawmaker equally outraged, because we have Megan, and she is a mom of a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-month-old. When she attended a Wyndham presentation, she was pregnant with child number 3, and she explained that my husband is a Marine, and he's being deployed to a combat zone. And the Wyndham sales agent told her that, according to her report, and why would she put herself in this position, that don't worry about your husband being deployed, because you can rent it out and cover the cost of the program. So this is a broken record complaint that we hear over and over and over. We've had Gary on the show. He's a Vietnam veteran. We had Tom, has been on the show twice. He is retired 23 years with the Baltimore Police Department. And both of them are high loyalty Wyndham members. Tom has over 1 million Wyndham points. And I don't know, 600,000 or something. They said if you buy, 300,000 more, you can rent out your points and cover the cost of the program. And he even provided the name of a person to be able to do that. And it worked until he received a cease and desist letter from Wyndham accusing him of commercial activity, which means he has been deliberately upsold into more points than he can afford. And after being a loyal member for 20 years, now he and his wife are talking about default. Okay, now I want to just talk about then the most recent. Just this morning, I talked to 2 people, and I think I could have convinced Joyce to be on the phone, but she is in the path of Hurricane Milton. And I just happened to be in St. Louis this week. I live in South Florida. We were supposed to have a 3rd guest on today's show, Jeannie, also an Ontario resident. She's in Florida. And so she had to head back to Canada to get in out of harm's way herself. But Joyce, that I spoke with this morning, along with Teresa, who bought from Westgate, I'll just start with Joyce. If we have time, we'll talk about some of the other people that called in this past week. But Joyce bought from Hilton Grand Vacations. She's also a single mom with she's also a mom of 3 children, a single mom in the path of Hurricane Milton. And so we love to take live calls on this show because we don't want to just be talking about horror stories, timeshare nightmares. We want to talk about education and empowerment and how to, I got to name this show Timeshare Solution or Surrender. So sometimes resorts will work with you and you'll get the outcome you want, but more often than not, the only outcome is to default. And one thing I forgot to talk about last week, and how I could forget to talk about good news because I'm showered with bad news, but we did receive a report from a prior guest. She received a refund check of $22,500 from a scam. And this was the most brazen and outraged. I mean, what they did to her was just bizarre. We're not going to name the name of the exit company because we want to reward a company when they do something right, even if they're a con artist who made that refund because the Tennessee Attorney General's office held their feet to the fire. So I wanted to report on that. But let's get back to Joyce in Florida. She said she was lied to about maintenance fees, that her sales agent told her that they would be, her monthly loan payments are $242 a month, and her maintenance fees would be double that. And instead, they're $1,600. Well, I always say I could be a robot auto denier. I know all of their answers. So I said, you need to look at your contract. And if your contract has the accurate fees, you will be told you should have read your contract. You had 10 days to cancel in Florida. And so we want to answer their challenges before they ask them. And then she was also told she could rent to offset the cost of the timeshare. Now, the 2 things that I disagreed with Joyce, she said, they told me that I could travel anywhere. And they told me that booking is simple. And I said, well, I'm a member of Diamond Resorts and Hilton bought Diamond. And while I criticize unfair and deceptive practices, I've really never had a problem booking. And I've always found relatively good value when I book. And so then I always ask the question, I asked her what she did for a living, and she said she works for an insurance company. She helps with automobile accident reports. I'm like, this is perfect. It's almost exact. It's a financial accident where trying to remember what happened. So she's got no problem writing up a report. Some people, if I say, okay, we need the first step is a clear, concise report. And please write that up, and we're allowed to review your report. And I may never hear from some people again if I tell them that. Some people, just like when I was a CASA volunteer, court-appointed special advocate for children in foster care, writing court reports for family court judges, some people you have to extract that report out of them. And so the second caller said, yes, I am one of those people. So we'll save her for the end. Okay, so now we're back to the present day. And I've asked Miriam to be on the show to support Karen as a fellow Ontarian, and to also realize the similarity between these. In high school, I remember learning about Plato's analogy of the caves. Do you guys remember that? Okay, where the guy's living in the cave down here his whole life and didn't know there was a universe above that cave. So Miriam is here about the Manhattan Club, Karen about Wyndham, and we had Teresa about Westgate. one of the goals is to realize that this is an industry-wide problem, and it's massive. We have no search engines, we have no ad budgets, and there is a steady stream of hardworking families. Miriam speaks 5 languages and worked as a stockbroker in Zurich. These are not dummies that don't know how to use their timeshares. These are people that 30 years ago could have never anticipated the disaster by reading the contract or the contract rescission period. So excuse me for being on a rant, angry at all these moms of 3 kids that are being put through this. But Karen, start with how you got into this and what you did to resolve the Wyndham Carriage Hills and Carriage Ridge situation.
So you said this podcast is 6 hours, right? Is that what you said?
It feels like 6 hours.
Well, it's been 5 years. So how to summarize it in a fashion that is, easily consumable. Let me summarize it as best I can, and then I'm absolutely happy to talk about, dive deeper into the details. So I retired in 2016. I had owned my timeshare at Carriage Hills, which is about an hour north of Toronto. I'd owned the timeshare for probably 15 years or so, quite a while. Was reasonably satisfied. Like the property was great, the staff were fantastic, the location was perfect for me because I traveled a lot for business, so it was nice to have a place close to home, far enough away that it felt like a vacation, but close enough that if I had to get back then for work, then I could. So it was about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from my home. I retired in 2016, I think, and a couple years later realized that I'm really not in need of this timeshare anymore. I was looking to shave back some costs, and was interested in getting rid of the timeshare. And so I first contacted Wyndham because when I bought the timeshare back in, I think, 2002 or somewhere around there, it was owned by a company called Shell Vacations, and a small organization, only had a small number of properties. But I think about
question was Carriage Hills independent before Shell bought them?
Yes, I believe it was, and everything I say is to the best of my knowledge and recollection. But my understanding, yes, is that there was a developer, and there was a beautiful piece of property just outside of Barrie, Ontario, again north of Toronto, who developed the land into 2 blocks. There was a block of units called Carriage Hills, and there was about maybe a 20-minute walk away, there was a block of units called Carriage Ridge. But they were both, built by the same group. They were built in phases, low-rise properties, right next to Horseshoe Valley, which was quite a popular ski resort, golf resort. So 4 seasons, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And so I'm not sure in the background, like when those units were first sold, I think in the early 90s, but I really don't know for sure. But when I came along to buy, at that point they were owned by Shell Vacations, and they were being sold as a timeshare. And we got the weekend stay and have the sales pitch. If you go, then you can have a free dinner, blah blah blah. So anyway, bought it, and like we bought it every other year.
Well, and let me stop you there.
Yep,
Kim,
please.
Kim, I asked her, I believe she has a picture of the flyer that you all were given. That
Yes.
There we have it. Thank you, Kim. If I think I've memorized it, where it says equity position,
Yep,
worry-free vacations,
yep,
have a say in your timeshare.
yep.
Oh my gosh. Now, whoever this was, I believe, Shell Vacations selling it after they acquired it, before Wyndham bought it.
Correct.
So
we never dealt with Wyndham. We never dealt with Wyndham when we bought. And yes, I very much remember that flyer. It was included in a packet of promotional information, as well as our contract that we were given at the time of selling. So yeah, all of those. And this was the big pitch was this was deeded property. So it was pitched similar to like if you and three other families bought a cottage and you each owned a quarter of the cottage, then, you know, at any point, then you wanted to sell your quarter, you could sell your quarter. And of course, as with most things, you know, over the years, property values go up. So of course, when the time comes to sell your piece of the cottage, you know, you'd be expected to make a profit, right? I mean, within reason, because of course markets fluctuate, but the fact that it was deeded property was a big pitch, and that's where the sort of equity position. But what I failed to sort of recognize, given that at Carriage Hills there was 172 units. It was like a little like three level townhouse feels.
And 11,000 buyers.
So yeah, so there's 172 units in Carriage Hills, and I think 70 some odd units at the much smaller Carriage Ridge. And between the two properties, I didn't know this, but there were almost 12,000 owners, deeded owners. And that those 12,000 owners, the number of deeds, because some people bought more than one deed, like more than one fraction or piece. So there was about 11,000 owners owning 17,000 deeds. So because if you look at it, it was 172 units, but they split it up into weeks, like proportional weeks. So you would buy, and they only counted 51 weeks because they said 50, you know, they would lock out a week for any sort of maintenance issues. So if you do all the math, you know, the 172 times the 51, and then the 75 or something, 77 units at Carriage Ridge times 51, you know, how you know what does the number turn out to be? It was that many deeds, and so as you can imagine, instead of in my example of sharing the cottage with three other families, I was sharing a unit with 17,000 other deeds. So when you go to sell, it's not like you get, you know, if it's $1 million cottage, you don't get $250,000. So you know, there's a lot of people, but you know, you don't really clue in that the deed is shared. So when the paperwork came several weeks later with the deed and your name on the deed, it was a fractional ownership, and they cut up the property into different pieces based on the phases. So anyway, it was confusing as heck, but nonetheless, you know, we used it, we loved it. We took our family there. You know, we golfed. I'm not much of a skier, so we tend to go during golf season. So we enjoyed it for several years. But then when the time came and I thought, you know what, I've retired, I want to get rid of this. The maintenance fees had started to get out of hand. I think when we bought, it was $400 or $500, and I originally owned it every other year. And then several years later, I bought another every other year to sort of fill in the off years. So it was somewhere around $500 and some odd dollars or $400 some odd dollars per deed that you paid per every other year. So you paid on the years that you were assigned. But when, you know, by 2016, 2018, 2019, the beginning of 2019, the maintenance fees were up over like $1,500. So it had gotten a little crazy, and I thought, you know what, I wanted it.
Let me stop you there. Miriam, is this sounding familiar?
Very familiar. Yeah, exactly. I think we were paying around $500 when I got the Manhattan Club, and you know, well, that was 2006. Now they're around 2,500, 3,000 on top of the usual amount that I paid to get 1 week a year in that place. It's totally dishonest.
Yeah.
Well, and in the lawsuit that was fought, the investigation against, and there's also a lawsuit with 200 plaintiffs against the Manhattan Club. They admitted that they artificially, I mean, this is New York City. Come on, $400 a month for a week for a year for maintenance fees. So they artificially kept those fees low just to get people in the door.
Yeah. But, you know, you said 200 in the group. I want to say also we have 14,500 owners apparently. So oversold, and also sold on booking.com. The cheaper price than what the owners can get it. I should take this opportunity to see if there is anybody that is in the Manhattan Club and hasn't joined the group. They should perhaps think about it, because the more the merrier. We're only 200 over 14,500 owners, apparently, to have a group, to fight, a legal group. So,
Well, and it is a mass action, not a class action, that there's actually 200 plaintiffs. And it was 2 years before the ruling came down, basically dismissing the lawsuit, but a motion has been filed for reconsideration. And the Manhattan Club, the attorney, Jean-Marc Zimmerman, wanted to clarify. There was a little bit of confusion in the letter that was sent that they are not going to charge any more fees. But if someone would want to join that lawsuit, I think they have to pay $1,500, some just a couple of filings. Okay, well, Karen, I just wanted to interject then there. So when did you smell a rat?
Well, so in early 2019, I decided, in consultation with my partner, that he and I wanted out. So I contacted, at that time, now Wyndham owns the property, right? So I contacted Wyndham because in looking around, I'd seen like advertisements for exit companies and so on. And I thought, well, let me just see. So I called the Wyndham consumer help phone line and said, like, if I wanted to sell.
It's called Wyndham Cares Department.
Oh, lovely.
they really
I should have known, because the gentleman I talked to, lovely guy, and I said, you know what, like if I want out of my timeshare, can I get out? And he was like, oh yes, of course. We have a program. It's called Wyndham Ovations. And I thought, oh, okay, good. And I think I'd even booked a holiday for early 2019. So I wasn't, easy, ready to jump on the bandwagon and get out. But it was nice to know, the sort of in the back of the of my head, that there was a way to exit, get out of my timeshare. So as the spring progressed, the months in 2019 progressed, and I think around April or May of 2019, I stumbled across the Facebook group. There was a Carriage Hills, Carriage Ridge owners Facebook group. And so I contacted them, just to see what the noise was and join the group. And there was quite a ruckus online about, people complaining they couldn't get out of their timeshare. So of course, being the helpful person I was, I put my comment in the Facebook and said, like, well, of course there is. It's called Wyndham Ovations. And I'm sure they were all laughing in the background at me, but they were very kind and said, no, it doesn't apply to the Carriage Hills, Carriage Ridge property in Canada. And then I thought, and I contacted Wyndham again, and they were like, yep, they confirmed that, oh, so sorry, no, Ovations is not available for you. So that's what opened the door, because then I looked into it further. I found out that, there were lots of property, I use the word properties very loosely, lots of timeshare programs or people online trying to sell their property for $0 or $1. And it was all these properties, and people were trying to sell. And so I learned from other people in the Facebook group, started to learn their horrific stories, because now some of these properties were, it was the adult children of the parents who had bought the timeshare, that the parents were now quite elderly and frail. Some had passed, and they weren't able to get rid of their properry.
And I want to just interject here that Stephanie's grandparents.
Right, that was the next generation down.
Yeah, we actually, between you and I and other owners, we published 23 articles about the situation. Yeah. Stephanie's grandfather was in a nursing home, and all of his pension was going towards that care. His wife had to move in, I think, with one of the kids. And at that same legislative workshop where I sat behind the current president of ARDA in 2019 in Tallahassee, who was then senior vice president of Wyndham, that says Wyndham had a hardship department, but also at that legislative session was Kenneth McKelvey, who is the chairman of ARDA Rock, the purported owners, resort owners side of of ARDA, and he testified, all resorts have a dissolution policy. Every single one. I've been in this business 30 years. Club Exploria, Vacation Village, Soleil Management, pick and choose some of those Wyndhams. Someone in the U.S. in Wyndham, their resort was not eligible for ovations. So, that's about 100 resorts right there where there is no responsible exit to this day. So, so now you've got your motor running and you're like, what are we going to do about this?
Yep. Yeah. And I'm retired, so I have lots of free time.
Yeah, but just like I said, Miriam and I are no dummies either. Do you have a PhD?
No. I've just got a bachelor's degree, but my background is in the sciences, and my job was to negotiate approvals with the federal government on behalf of chemical companies who wanted to import and manufacture new chemicals. So the idea of putting together evidence-based arguments to support a position and negotiate that with federal governments is not a scary thing to me. This is what I did for 25 years. So, and
there's also another ulterior motive here, Karen, is another of the pod TV shows is a science show. And you have an encyclopedic knowledge of the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, and that's a whole other show, so we won't go there. But yes, gathering information and critical thinking and looking at evidence and versus just blindly taking what people say as fact is a whole nother set of skills that can be ascribed to so many different scenarios. So, but the other thing too, Irene, so as I was shocked with this apparent set of handcuffs, and I'm thinking about my son doesn't want the timeshare, and I don't, when my time comes to leave this earth, I don't want to leave him with a burden. But more importantly than that, there were already children and grandchildren, as you mentioned, Stephanie, who had already been fighting this battle for a while to get rid of their timeshare. And the big problem was this deed. It was deeded property. The Ontario municipalities, it recognized the same way as if you owned, I'll go back to that cottage, with real, it's considered real property. It's not a right to use like a fitness center or a gym or something, or no, this was, you owned a very small, but you owned a piece of real property. It was registered with the municipality of Barrie. And so just as if, if I died and I hadn't made arrangements for the cottage, I go back to this cottage, this fictional cottage, my kids would be stuck with having to sell the cottage. And if it was...
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
In the U.S., every state has a law that allows an heir to disavow inheritance within a period of time after passing. Does Canada have the similar law?
Not that I'm aware of. And maybe because I'm not an estate lawyer, but the dilemma was, so here was the way that was set up, was if the owner, let's say the owner's dead, okay, they passed away, God rest their soul, and they're, the kids are trying to, sell off the family china and get rid of the house and the sofa and the, all the goods, and they have this timeshare. If they couldn't sell it, then, especially when the time came that the maintenance fees were due again, the maintenance fees would be, sent to the owner. And if they weren't paid, then reminder notices and exorbitant fees would be added to the unpaid maintenance fees. And then, as time went by, then it was sent to collections. And then and it would just keep being, added and added, and then the next year would come on.
I heard some went to court, and they ruled in favor of the resort to collect those fees.
Correct. So if you have property, now I would think that, if I didn't pay the property taxes on my home, the city would, seize the property and sell it in lieu of, or sell it in order to pay the taxes. But the big problem that we had here is nobody was buying. I mean, you couldn't sell the bloody thing for $1. So if you have no secondary market, then, what do you do with these properties? So fast forward a little bit, there was, looking at this Facebook group, there was quite a large gathering of people that were in the situation. They wanted out of their timeshare, or they wanted out of their parents' timeshare, or they wanted out of their grandparents' timeshare. And there was this growing voice to get rid of this timeshare. Now, the other financial burden that was associated was, so some people, either by death or other reasons, stop paying their maintenance fees, right? Now, as you can imagine, let's pretend I'm on the board and I have an operating budget that requires the fees, the revenue to be a certain number of dollars. And if I don't get paid by, some of those owners, then I'm going to have a shortfall on my budget. So then next year, when I figure out, okay, I need to up the fees to pay for the money that didn't come in the previous year from the owners that weren't paying, and so that added to the escalation in the maintenance fees. And then because the number's higher now, more people stop paying their fees, and then that gets added to the following year, and so then the number is higher again. And at its peak, I believe that there was about $25 million in unpaid maintenance fees and penalty fees and interest and like all these added fees. So if you can imagine the board trying to make up that shortfall, the only way they get money is by the maintenance fees, right? So it's a rapidly escalating problem when more and more people default, which triggers more fees to go up, which triggers more defaults, which triggers more fees to go up, and so on and so forth. So it was really a train, run, like about to run off the rails and over the cliff. So it was abundantly clear that there were serious financial issues with both properties. And so the board, listening, I guess, to a certain degree, listening to the people screaming that something has to be done, a lot of people were calling for the properties to be sold. And the board, indicated they weren't too keen on that. And as you can imagine, there were a bunch of people that indicate they wanted to keep their timeshare. So clearly, you either have to sell or restructure or something. So the board started. They had law firms. They brought on a BDO, which is a restructuring strategy, strategic company, and everything went quiet for a while. Now we knew that, and here's where you come in, Irene, that the annual general meeting in 2019, I think, was supposed to take place in October, September,
October 20.
October, thank you. Seems like quite a while ago. So I think we met you through, as you said, the administrator of that Facebook group, and you were very kind to write some stories because we knew we had to get the word out. We had to start.
Well, actually, I was flying to our timeshare in Maui, and I had published that article right before we left. By the time I got to Maui, there were 134 responses. And we published all of those responses over a series of several articles. And I reached out to the CVOA, the Canadian Vacation Ownership Association, which is the counterpart to ARDA, the American Resort Development Association. And they said, this is a very complicated matter, and we will need some time to explore this and come up with a solution. So by this time, then, at what point did anyone reach out to the Ontario Consumer Protection Government Agency?
So yeah, this is where the Three Amigos starts to come in, and I'll say the Three Amigos and Team Awesome, because this is not just my story. This is not just my efforts or what have you. I am a single soldier in a platoon. So Three Amigos, because it was myself and I don't have permission to give their full names, so I'll call them Lori and Bruce. The three of us banded together to I guess take the lead on really pushing some of this. And there were others. That's why I call them Team Awesome. There's about a dozen other folks. And we knew that we needed to get the word out, because let me, if I may just sort of backtrack a little bit, because in the timeshare contract for the Shell Vacations Wyndham property, there was a provision that, and it was in the fine print, but there was a provision that said if more than 80, I think it was more than 80% of the owners voted for what we called obsolescence, then the property would have to be sold, the program dismantled, and there'd be subsequent discussion about how to pay everybody out. So we saw this contract as the opportunity to rally as many people as we could, because if it turned out that, you know, less than 5% were interested in getting out, then that's a different story than if 90% wanted out, right? Because then we'd have to look at, well, is there a way to buy ourselves out, like pay and get out? But anyway, there'd be a look at restructuring. So at the same time that, you know, we're planning to have, so the board of directors agreed that and then remember, there's two properties, Carriage Hills, Carriage Ridge, and their AGMs were back to back on I think two separate days back to back. And they agreed, at least for the Carriage Hills package, included a vote for or against obsolescence. So this Three Amigos and Team Awesome agreed that we really needed to get the word out to hear the voice of the people, because normally they would only get a couple of hundred people. Now remember, it's 11,000 owners. They'd only get a couple hundred people maybe at the AGMs. So we knew we really had to work hard to get the voice out. So we really started pushing the Facebook group. We pushed it up against the board to try and get the mailing list for all the owners, because obviously they knew who they were, because they were mailing maintenance fees bills to them every year.
That probably took more than 10 minutes.
It took several rounds and a threat to go to court because they didn't want to do it. And there was precedence in other circumstances where owners could get access to the
and that they want to protect our privacy. Never mind that we get 5 to 10 calls a day from people that have all of our information.
Exactly. So in amongst that flurry of activity to find owners and get them to come to the AGM, and if they can't come, then sign their proxy. We got them to sign their proxies over to Lori, so she was getting, you know, because she was going to be there in person to indicate what their wishes were. We also contacted the Ontario Consumer Protection Division for the Ministry of Consumer Corporate Affairs, and so because we wanted them to know what was going on. We were successful in getting them to attend the AGM, but not the first one. You might say, what do you mean not the first one? And that's because, as you know, Irene, because you were so very kind to come to Canada and you know, visit with those of us. We had made arrangements before the AGM to have a sort of meet and greet and talk about the financial situation of the properties. And
because I'm a volunteer, you folks did a GoFundMe.
We did a GoFundMe.
The fees.
We did, and I remember I drove over the border and picked you up from Buffalo. You were so kind, and brought you to my house, and yeah, like yeah, we were able to have a significantly greater interest in the AGM. So it's held at a building that holds probably about 400 people, and well over, my estimate is well over 1,000 people showed up. So
and my personal Facebook banner is that picture of 1,000 people. It was, yes. I call it a Woodstock moment. You know,
it was, and it was October, and you know, and cold, very cold, and people were standing outside in the cold trying to get in.
Right, CTV was there.
Yes,
the Canadian
yeah.
CNN type.
So we called the media, we called everybody to hear our plight. And so when you normally have maybe 205 times as many people show up for the AGM, that's a bit of a splash. And the board that was meeting inside wanted to go ahead with the AGM while, you know, 800 or 700 people are still standing outside. So the people inside said, no, you can't go ahead with the meeting if not all the members are inside. So they had to scrap that AGM and hold it at another time where they could get a larger facility. And so I think about a month later, they held it at Casino-Rama, their big entertainment venue where, you know, rock stars perform. And I think it holds about 5,000 people. And it was at that follow-up AGM, because in between the first attempt at the AGM and the sequel, AGM, the sequel, we had been in touch with the government, the Ontario government. They agreed to take a meeting with us. We had put together a slide deck that you know, laid out. I've had lots of meetings in my career with government, so I know how to talk to them, you know, fairly and calmly and lay out our situation. And so we had a connection there, and that person, who happens to live in Barrie, I believe, agreed to come to the AGM. So he came to Casino-Rama and sat next to me in the front row, where we had the obsolescence vote. And as you can imagine, we didn't get 80% of 11,000 owners. So the obsolescence vote failed. But it was clear, though, when you have 1,000 people that want out, and they were livid because Wyndham, who owned about 12% of all the units, voted to put their own person on the board because it was also an election of the new board of directors. So that was infuriating. But at least at that point, the government saw, what was going on with the voice of the people. And we had been informed in our meeting that the Ontario government was also in the process of updating their Consumer Protection Act, which had been in place for, 20 years or so. And they agreed to put provisions in the new act to protect timeshare owners. So that helped to get that on the docket. And
did they follow through with that?
They did. Yep. I think in December of 2023. So this is all, I'm sort of fast forwarding ahead, jumping over at least to sort of close the loop on the government issues. The new Consumer Protection Act 2023 has received royal assent. There is a provision. Now the act enables subsequent regulations to be put in place. So the regs haven't come out yet, but the act has a place in it for timeshare considerations that has an automatic exit out. Now, sadly, you have to own your property for 25 years before you can automatically get out. But at least it stops this sort of in perpetuity clause that was in our timeshare clause, which said your responsibilities, the program will continue in perpetuity unless 80% of all owners vote to abandon it. So this in perpetuity clause was what was forcing children and grandchildren of their parents and grandparents to continue to participate in a program that they didn't want. It's that.
Well, I believe clause. That Quebec took it a step further, and amended the Timeshare Act so that they redefined a timeshare as a service contract, kind of like a gym contract, where liberal reasons to cancel.
Yeah. So and I believe that consumer protection is a provincial thing. So it needs to be addressed province by province by province. That's why it was the Ontario government, not the feds, that helped us out. So the AGM was a giant wake up to the Ontario government, which was great because they could see it in firsthand. It solidified that we had, lots more people than we envisioned that were equally angry. We pushed that Facebook group, and I think at its peak there was, many thousands of people in that Facebook group. We also were successful in getting the attention of local media. CTV, or at least the mainstream TV station, was kind of disappointing. But the Barrie, there was a Barrie paper with a court reporter who was interested in, they would report on news in the courts. And she was interested in the situation. So she came on board, and she was writing articles about, the plight of the property and the plight of the owners. And she pushed our Facebook group a little bit
in Collingwood. I think there was a media in Collingwood.
Yes. Yeah. So and many times these little cottage towns all sort of share news. So Newswire, if I can use that word. So stories that would show up in one paper would show up in other papers in the area, and that's very, and where this property was definitely cottage country. So the owners would have been sort of all over. But for the sake of time, let me fast forward a little bit. So BDO came on board. Everything was acting a little slow. The AGM ended up, even though we failed in reaching the 80% of 11,000 people saying they want out. Because I think we had about 4,000 people that showed up to, or maybe 3,000 that showed up to the sequel AGM. Obviously, the word was out on the street. So fast forward to, and I'm leaving out lots of details just for time. That's why I said, do we have 6 hours? Fast forward to, I think it was April. We got word that BDO had hired a lawyer. We had lawyers come out the wazoo, and we're paying for them all. That they were going to go to court and establish BDO as the administrator of the property, and yes, it would be, put up for sale. Now, I'm leaving out so many details. There was a survey because they wanted to make sure that people wanted out. Originally, they were going to just restructure. And so Three Amigos and Team Awesome said, no, you need to find out, because there was a loud group that wanted to keep the property. And I said, yeah, but there's a loud group that wants it sold. And I said, so before you start making any decisions, you need to send out a survey. If you've got the members list because of sending out the bills, you need to send out a court supported survey that asks people, do you want out or do you want to stay in a restructured resort? And they softened. We didn't, now that it was being done under court, we didn't have to worry about the legal contract that said 80% of the 11,000 owners would trigger the sale. It was now, I think, two-thirds. I could have that wrong, but at least now they would respond based on the percentage of owners that responded to the survey. So if there were some that had disappeared, we wouldn't worry about their voice. So yeah, we did that survey, and overwhelming came back to sell. So through multiple and by the way, so we're in April of 2020 now. I wonder what was happening in the world of April 2020. There was a wondering, like, there was no taking it to the streets with placards. There was no, in-person meetings because we had this little thing called COVID show up.
There was no Canadian residents going to New York to stay at their Manhattan club.
Nope.
And they got no compensation for it.
No. And so yeah, the border was closed. Nobody could travel. But the big thing for us was that court went online. So the court hearings went online, which turned out to be hugely advantageous for us because courts only have so many seats in person. But as soon as it went online, you could have as many people as you want attend court. Mm-hmm. So we had like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people showing up to the courts. That it really blew the judge away. Like, oh my God, this is a big deal. And so the Three Amigos and Team Awesome hired our own attorney through another GoFundMe, God love the power of the people, to represent our interests, because what we were seeing was that the board was very pro restructure. And so the lawyer for the board and the lawyers for BDO were, everything that they would talk about was leaning towards, keeping the properties alive, restructuring, and maybe, and so we got our own lawyer Lou, and I'll put a plug for him, although I haven't got his permission to say his name, Lou Brzezinski from Blaney McMurtry in Toronto, took us on, and I'll tell you, he probably did 10 hours for every 1 hour he billed, because he knew we were just a small group of people with GoFundMe money. And he went to the hearings, and we had lots of conversations, and he was the one that negotiated on our behalf and was excellent in representing the voice of the people who wanted out. So the judge ultimately agreed that yes, the property would be sold because the survey results that came back indicated that's what was wanted. And with, the stroke of her pen, she was able to essentially, lift us out of all these signed deeds, because they put the property for sale. It was sold to a company out of Toronto. I think they're a hotel chain, Sunray Groups. I think they sold it for about $60 million. And the judge was able to, because as you can imagine, trying to think about when you sell your house to one other party, how there's all this paperwork you have to sell to transfer the deed. Try and transfer 17,000 deeds to a new owner. Like, that's just unwieldy. And the Barrie office, land transfer office, was like, oh my God, because they had all their deeds in paper. It was the last property in Ontario that wasn't on the digital land registry database. So they had boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of these deeds that would have to be transferred to the new owner. So luckily, going through the court system, and the judge we had, fantastic lady. We are so lucky that she understood and was able to do whatever she could do with the stroke of a pen to have the transfer over.
So you did get 2/3 of the people to vote that they wanted to terminate the timeshare?
The survey was overwhelming that people wanted out. I don't know. I can't recall what percentage of 11,000 people voted, like responded to the survey. I don't know. That's sort of because BDO was handling that in the background. They used consultants for surveys. They used lawyers for surveys. They use financial advisors for surveys. Like, oh my God, there's so many consultants, and that I don't know how many millions of dollars was taken out of the proceeds. But eventually, and I'm looking at the time, I'm sensitive. The success story is the property was sold. People had to prove that they were owners. Money was distributed.
Now that's a big question. How much money did, say, a 2-bedroom get?
Well, so I had a 2-bedroom every other year, and I had, and it was. This is a sad thing. It was divided between all of the names on the deed. So luckily, it was just myself and my partner. Okay, so I think we got about, I think all in all, because it was paid out in certain phases, because we got a lump sum at a certain amount at the beginning. BDO held some money back while they sorted out delinquencies and vendors that needed to be paid and so on. So I think all in all, I think we got about $3,000. But it was sold for $60 million. So I don't know, do the math. We did get paid, and those, and here was the other challenge. I remember back when we first bought, it was, we were there with our kids, and the salesperson said, oh, because I said, well, what if, my son, who was, I think, about 5 at the time, what if when he's older, he wants to use the timeshare, say, to go skiing with his friends? And they said, oh yeah, well, he could, if you put him on the deed, then, it makes it easier for him to sign in, but it's not impossible. Like, you would have to send a letter, or you might have to be with him when he checks in. So we decided not to put him on the deed, but there were people who put all of their children on the deed, or all of their grandchildren on the deed. And as you can imagine, because we saw some of that paperwork, you might have 8 or 10 names on the deed. Well, the amount of money that was paid out was assigned to the deed, and then they had to issue payments to each person on the deed. So if there were 10 people, each of the 10 people had to register saying, I have a claim. And then that, those 10 people would get a 1/10 of the piece that was assigned. So as you can imagine, the paperwork nightmare was just, and then some people wanted automatic deposits to their bank accounts. Some people wanted checks mailed to them. And so it took a long time. So years. So from the spring of 2019, when Wyndham said, oh, get out from Ovations, I think my last check came to me, or the last deposit came to me about 4 months ago. So 2019 to now, but we're out. The property is sold. I don't know. I haven't been back there. I'm not sure what's happened with the property. I know it was in a state of, it needed some serious repairs when we were getting rid of it. So, but you know what? Not my circus, not my monkeys. So,
well, and Miriam, you can understand why I invited you on the show today.
It's very interesting. It's actually fascinating. I wonder if I don't think so, but the Manhattan Club, there are many people who haven't paid for a long time these fees, and some have been given a deal that they could surrender their deed for $1. Now it used to be $100, but let's say I paid $32,350 US to have a 1 week use of, and then the fees go to 2,500. I don't know, how they can compensate. I don't know how much you paid originally for the carriage property that you.
Remember, I bought every other year, and then a couple years I bought another every other year. And I think that I paid about $12,000 in 2002, and then I paid about $14,000 in 2010. So, roughly $25,000 to get, and as you say, the maintenance fees that went up. So every year, paying the maintenance fees, and then, to walk away with probably just around $3,000.
And we have about 10 seconds left. It's been a fascinating. Thank you so much to both Miriam and Karen and Kim. And my apologies for my senior moment with the time zone.
Excused entirely.
Well, that's okay. But also, I just want to send a shout out to, you, Irene. Please be careful and stay safe in your travels. As we all are aware, there's another hurricane hitting, and everybody goes, oh, it's supposed to hit Florida. And I go, how many times do we say that? And it shifts. So, you know, you can't,
For Florida.
right.
Shifting
So,
my house right now.
right. You know, and so let's, you know, just be careful. You know, we have a lot going on and a lot of disasters right now. If you're traveling, it can be dangerous. The roads are closed in so many places here on the East Coast. My sister and I rerouted 2 or 3 times getting down to Atlanta to help my other sister. So everyone be careful. Thank you so much for watching Timeshare Solutions or Surrender. If you have a problem, bring it to Irene. Let me tell you what.
To us, not Irene.
Right. But bring it to us here on the TV show because we've actually found a lot of solutions. And it's not always going up against the timeshare. It's sometimes helping you figure out how to best use it. Meanwhile, take care and we'll see you soon.
Stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good luck, everybody. Take care.